Hey everyone, it's Firelink Frontier. Today I thought I'd try a bit of a different video. So I watched every single James Bond film. Yep, every single one. And that's not including the films like the old Casino Royale and Never Say Never Again. This is just the Eon Productions films. And today I'm going to rank them on a tier list. I'm not going to be going super in depth into them. And this video is probably just going to be me trying to remember the plot lines of 25 films. But anyway, here we go. So I'm going to go in release order. And we'll start off with Dr. No.
Bond. James Bond.
So this is the one that started it all. It stars Sean Connery, and he just is Bond, isn't he? I love his introduction at the poker table. But I've got to say, overall the film's pretty average. It's got a kind of run-of-the-mill villain, Dr. No, who's part of Spectre. He wants to disrupt an American space rocket launch, or something to that effect. Overall the film's pretty average, but I did like it. I'd put that in, let's say, C tier. And then we move on to From Russia with Love. Now this one's a lot better. I really love the Cold War era Bonds. And the villain is a former Soviet counterintelligence agent. It's also got the guy from Jaws, Robert Shaw, who plays Donald Grant and is sent to assassinate Bond. While it is better than Dr. No, I wouldn't say it's my favourite. But it's definitely a good film, and I'll put it in B tier. Then we move on to the third Sean Connery film, Goldfinger. And this one really is one of my favourites. While sometimes the villains can go too far and be too out there, this manages to get it right. We've got a great villain and a great henchman too, that can kill people by throwing his top hat. With Bond films, I know they can sometimes go over the top with the villains. But I kinda like that. It is possible to go too far though. I guess it's not really an exact science, but this film gets it right. This is also the film that features the famous Bond car that has the ejector seat. And the film's got everything you could want. A heist on Fort Knox, cool gadgets, cars, car chases. This has easily got to be A tier. And it's definitely one of the best Bond films. The next one, Thunderball, is a bit of a letdown. Especially after Goldfinger. In fact, I have to remember what this film's even about. I remember there's a lot of underwater stuff. But overall, the film's not very memorable. And it's definitely not as good as Goldfinger. I'd put that probably in D tier. It's not great, but it's not that bad either. The villain is the second in command to Blofeld. And as you'll see in the next film, it's all been leading up to him. So the next one is You Only Live Twice. And we finally see the appearance of Blofeld, the head of Spectre. I know he's been parodied a lot, in Austin Powers as Dr. Evil. So he might seem silly to some people. But I thought the reveal was pretty cool. But the film's also pretty average as well. I'd say I preferred it to Thunderball, but it's nowhere near as good as Goldfinger or From Russia with Love, so I'll put it in C tier. Then it's time for a new Bond with George Lazenby in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And to be honest, this is one of my least favourite ones. I really didn't like George Lazenby as Bond, and the story really dragged. It's funny, I can see all these other actors as Bond, but for some reason when I was watching it, I just didn't feel like I was even watching a Bond film. The only positive part I really liked was the ending, where Bond gets married and then his wife is tragically murdered. You have Bond holding her body saying everything's going to be alright. That part was really good, but the rest of the film was pretty forgettable. For this one, I don't know whether to put it in E or F. This one's got to be my least favourite out of all of them. I'm going to have to put it in F. And after that film we see Sean Connery return in Diamonds Are Forever. It's certainly better than the last film. However, it's another average Connery film. Blofeld returns as the villain. I remember this film does have a cringe-worthy fight, with Bond fighting these two women, but I remember the whole scene is in complete silence, and it just feels awkward to watch. That is something they tend to do in these old Bond films. A lot of the fight scenes are in complete silence. Now, I'm not saying they need to add some heavy music in the background every time, but there's a lot of standing about, and I don't think they've aged very well. I'll put Diamonds Are Forever in the D tier as well. I might change some of them when we come to the end, but I'll keep going for now. Then we have Live and Let Die, starring Roger Moore for the first time. I quite like this one. It's got the guy from Alien, Yaphet Kotto, starring as the villain Kananga. I know that Roger Moore's Bond can be pretty polarising, as it starts to go into the silly territory, but I quite like him. Not all his films are good though. But I quite like Live and Let Die. He's sent to investigate the murders of 3 MI6 agents, who've all been killed within 24 hours of each other. I'm going to put this film in B tier, because I quite liked it. My next rating's probably going to be controversial. The Man with the Golden Gun is next. I was surprised it only had 40% on Rotten Tomatoes. I quite like this film, and it's got Christopher Lee as the villain. He plays Scaramanga with his iconic golden gun, and he has his sidekick Knick-Knack. Maybe it does get pretty silly in parts, but I still liked it. So this might be controversial, but I'm going to put this in B tier. And next up we have The Spy Who Loved Me. Despite its silly name, The Spy Who Loved Me is by far Roger Moore's best Bond film, and it introduces the classic villain Jaws with his metal teeth. Bond is forced to work alongside a KGB agent in order to beat the villain Karl Stromberg. And for me, this has got to go straight into A tier. I really did like this film, and it's definitely one of my favourites. The next film, however, is not one of my favourites. Moonraker. It's here we go into the silly territory again. Clearly inspired by the success of Star Wars, we now have Bond in space. A positive aspect is Jaws returns again, and we have that cool scene where he's wearing the clown mask in the alleyway. It's definitely one of the creepier moments of Bond. I like the cable car fight as well, but overall the film isn't great. I'm debating whether to put Moonraker in D or E. It might have to be D tier. The last 3 Roger Moore films aren't very good either. I'm actually struggling to remember what they're even about. In For Your Eyes Only, I remember Bond visits the grave of his wife. It's one of the only other times she's mentioned after her death. The continuity in the old films is a bit weird, but I kinda like that. Unlike the newer ones with Daniel Craig, the continuity in these ones is a little up in the air. But I think that's better, to be honest. I understand what they were trying to do with Daniel Craig's ones, but he ended up not really being Bond. Well, not for me at least. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll come to that when we reach the Daniel Craig ones. Then we have this Bond film. Am I allowed to say that name on YouTube? We'll just call it Octocat, and we'll move on. And then we've got A View to a Kill, with Christopher Walken in it as the villain with his weird hair. Also, Roger Moore is 57 in that film. They probably should have got a new Bond sooner. So for these 3 films, I'm going to put these 2 in E, and I'll put A View to a Kill in D, because I kind of like Christopher Walken's weird villain. Then we move on to Timothy Dalton's Bond. And maybe this is going to be controversial again, but I quite like Timothy Dalton as Bond. It's a lot more serious. They probably go too far with the seriousness, like they do in License to Kill, where they have that guy's head explode, in one of the most gruesome deaths in the series. And in The Living Daylights you have Bond in Afghanistan, where he's basically a soldier at that point. But I still like them both, and they're some of the best Bond films. It's a shame we didn't really get more of Timothy Dalton's Bond, but next we get one of the best Bond films ever made. Pierce Brosnan is the Bond that I grew up with, so maybe I'm a little biased. But GoldenEye's going straight in A tier. I think Pierce Brosnan's Bond is a little bit underrated. I know his other films were a little bit more mixed, but I don't think that was his fault. GoldenEye introduces Judi Dench as M, and really brings Bond into the modern era. It's got great villains, great stunts, cool chases, and Sean Bean's in it as well, as 006. Also, who can forget the tank scene? It's definitely A tier, and it's possibly my favourite Bond film. So after that great film, we follow up with Tomorrow Never Dies. And this film was such a disappointment. The villain is just some newspaper mogul, and it really was forgettable and such a letdown. So that's going straight in E tier. Next we've got The World Is Not Enough, and it's better than the previous film, but it also doesn't reach the highs of GoldenEye. I think it's a little bit underrated, and it's got a cool villain as well, so I'm going to put that in C tier. Then we have Die Another Day, and it's where Bond becomes silly again. Bond films do have a tendency to get more and more over the top as they go along, and this one's got invisible cars and a ring that shatters glass. It's not as bad as Tomorrow Never Dies, but it's not great either. It's a shame Pierce Brosnan never got more serious films, because despite most of his films not being that good, he's definitely one of my favourite Bonds, and maybe my favourite after Sean Connery. But this one's got to go in D tier. Daniel Craig has the opposite problem as Pierce Brosnan. His Bond films are really serious, but I don't really like him as Bond that much. But despite that, Casino Royale is definitely an A tier. It completely reinvents Bond, and gives us an origin story. We see Bond getting his first kills and becoming a 00 agent, and then going on his first mission against Le Chiffre. Le Chiffre is played by Mads Mikkelsen, and he really is one of the best villains in the series. The parkour chase at the beginning is great as well, but despite the film being so good, I wouldn't really say it's because of Daniel Craig, but it's got to go in A tier. Next we have another disappointing second film, with Quantum of Solace. This film is just a mess. It's really boring and nothing happens. It doesn't even have a memorable villain. It carries on from where Casino Royale left off, but it's got to go straight into E tier for me. Now Skyfall is one I'm conflicted about. It's got a great villain, but we also have depressed Bond. I understand what they were trying to do, but I don't really want to see a Bond that can't shoot and goes around depressed all the time. And while I like the villain played by Javier Bardem, I'm sure the more I think about his plan, the less it will make sense. It's very convoluted, and it becomes ridiculous at times, but I did like the film, especially towards the end with M, so I'm going to put it in B tier. Now we come to the penultimate one, Spectre, and it's another forgettable one. Christoph Waltz was such a letdown. I thought he'd be a good villain, but it turns out he was boring and forgettable. There's not even much to say about this film. It was just a disappointment. It had so much potential, considering it's supposed to be the culmination where Bond discovers Spectre, the shadowy organisation behind everything. But it really wasn't that, and it's got to go straight into E tier. And now we have the last one, No Time to Die. This film ends the Daniel Craig era, and it was pretty disappointing as well, to be honest. It tries some new things like giving Bond a daughter, and the villain had potential too, starring Rami Malek. But again, I think it takes itself too seriously. This has got to be another D tier. So I'm just looking at the list and seeing if I'd make any changes. Yeah, I'd say that's my final list. So let me know in the comments what you think, and tell me who your favourite Bond is, and also your favourite Bond film. I hope you've enjoyed this video and thank you for watching. I'm Firelink Frontier, and if you want to help support the channel, please like the video and subscribe.